Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
2 months ago, about 2 a.m., home alone. Husband is working a night shift. About to go to bed. Decide to take the dog out first. There is an empty lot bordering the woods behind us. Take the dog over there to poop. Dog poops and we are heading back to the house. Lights are on in the house and we have large windows in the back. Just as we enter the backyard, the dog stops. I look. See something in the house. Lanky and white humanish looking thing. Not wearing any noticeable clothing. Bizarrely shaped, kind of deformed. Too tall, much taller than my 6'7" husband looks standing in the same area of the house. Panic. Double back through the gate. Run down the area between houses until I found an unlocked gate. Go through the neighbor's backyard. Go around to the front. 4 houses down from mine. Bang on their door. Neighbor comes to the door. Don't sure what I should tell her. Tell her I think someone is in my house. She knows me pretty well. She lets me in to call the police. Call 911 and tell them I think someone broke in. Call my husband and tell him. He says he's coming home. The police arrive. They have me wait outside until they check the house. They don't find anything. Find stuff out of place though. The coffee table had been moved. The couch was standing on its end. Kind of like the center of the floor had been cleared. The back door was standing wide open. I had of course closed it when I went out. Not sure if I locked it, but I had my keys in my pocket, so I probably did. Police stayed around the house the rest of the night, driving up and down the street. Husband and I didn't sleep. Dog sniffed every inch of the house. Dog got really weird and growled at nothing a lot. He eventually peed and threw up several times. Wouldn't sleep downstairs in his bed anymore after that. The whole experience was beyond creepy. I don't want to suggest it was necessarily paranormal or unexplainable, but it was very scary and I still feel very uneasy in the house alone day or night.
First of all, I am a college degree holder in anthropology. Also did field investigation for Mutual UFO Network in the 80s and into the mid-90s. And currently a private paranormal investigator. My brother, who had the sighting as well, is also a former Mutual UFO Network 1970s investigator and is currently vice president for a Fortune 500 company in the IT field. I've seen it as well as he has. We were vacationing in Panama City Beach, Florida, and had decided to boat out to Shell Island Nature Preserve, arriving just an hour before sunset. Sunset came and went, and just before darkness began to fall, we returned to the boat, which we had to wade to from shore. We had to be more than 20 feet offshore for fear of getting caught on a sandbar. This was October 22, 2002, a clear day in the 80s. As we waded out to the boat and were getting in, we saw the craziest sight. All the birds and wildlife took off at once and scattered in every direction from the spot we had just come. The sound and sight immediately drew our full attention. We saw the thing waddle out from the bush. This was a small one, 7 to 8 feet tall. Judging from the bush height along the shore. Our cameras were in the boat since we had gone to Shell Island for a little metal detecting and beach combing. It looked directly at us and paced back and forth along the shore for approximately the distance of 30 feet in total. We didn't wait around to get a better view of it once we saw the head crest. It was a pterosaur, period. Not something I want to see again in this lifetime, because its mama will be at least 18 to 20 feet tall. People are not reporting them because 1. In flight there is no way of judging length, and they may very well be soaring at a height where they simply appear as small planes or other birds. 2. It is simply too bizarre for the mind to comprehend, and thus the sighting is pigeonholed into some type of logical, rational explanation, instead of a freaking dinosaur.
I live in Northwest Indiana, Crown Point to be specific, about 30 or 45 minutes away from Chicago. At around 8:30 p.m. on September 17, 2022, I was standing at the front of my garage while talking to my mom, dad, and uncle. I kept hearing this flapping noise, but didn't feel too alerted by it until it started getting louder and faster sounding. I actually thought it was our flag out front, which is a decently big-sized flag. That's what it sounded like, but I realized my mom had taken it down. That's when I stepped outside of the garage to see what it was. It was across the street, above my neighbor's garage, and it looked just as long as this 2-car garage. I saw it for a split second. It clearly was flying fast and didn't want to be seen, but it was loud. I also conveniently live across from a forest. I told my family and they laughed it off, saying it must have been a pterodactyl. I did notice it looked all white, or at least the wings that I saw definitely were. I have also seen owls around here, but it was not that though. It was very big. I have been researching what I can since I saw it, and a Reddit search led me to you. I'm very curious, but too scared to venture into the forest alone as a 27-year-old woman. This isn't the first time I've seen weird things in the sky. I saw a UFO 2 times in my life, thankfully, with other sober people. But God, this is like nothing I've ever seen before. And although I'm sure it wasn't a prehistoric dinosaur, it probably was close to being as big as one. I really wish I had stepped out earlier to see it actually flying past my house, but from what I was lucky enough to see, it looks very similar to the pictures online of pterosaurs.
I hadn't thought about this one in many years, but I was just sitting around wandering the web. I came upon a page purporting that there have been a huge number of Mothman sightings around Lake Michigan since 2017, and a not insignificant number prior. Anyway, I've never actually seen the thing. Not a good look at least, but once back in 2009 I was out on an angry walk. You know the kind, struggling with your significant other, definitely not gonna last between you and they royally pissed you off, so you go walk it off. Well, I'm hooking left around the corner when I hear what I at the time immediately took as like a pterodactyl scream. Since reading these other accounts, I would certainly also describe it as similar to brake screeching, but as if brakes could feel vast amounts of pain, loneliness, and anger. It was like it reached into me with that screech and scooped up all the feelings it recognized and relayed that back to me. But I also, in hearing that sound, it was like the resonance of it gave me a picture of the size of the thing. It was absolutely at least twice my size, and I'm a big person. I searched the graveyard with my eyes, but it was late and the tree line behind it made it hard to tell what I was looking at. Still, I did make out a rough size of an outline that matched what I had been thinking before the thing screeched again, this time as if anxious and upset that I was trying to better see it. I say that because that second screech gave me the instant reaction to not only look away, but I threw my hands up in the air and shouted, "Okay. Okay. I'll keep going." Before I heard what I can only describe as enormous wings lifting a large body into the sky. I was far enough away that I wouldn't have felt it and certainly didn't, and it's not like I can definitively say I know what a 400 or 500 pound winged creature would sound like taking off, but I definitely pieced that information together in an instant. It felt like it had come to connect and left disappointed yet again that a person tried to investigate it rather than just communicate on its terms. The 2 screeches were 2 distinctly emotional cries as I recall. It was as plain as if I found someone in a field shouting at the sky and then they huffed off in frustration after my response was not to their liking. That was what always struck me about it. I love animals and I love people. I love listening to both, but it generally takes me some time with any particular animal before I can understand them in that kind of way, where their voice betrays emotion. People can't hide it at all. I am shook just remembering back to those screeches and the clarity with which I felt the emotions behind them.
Almost 30 years ago, when I was a kid, I saw something like a flying humanoid in the night sky in Frankfort, Illinois. Frankfort is about 35 miles south of Chicago, and at the time, it was still a fairly rural area. I remember it being larger than a human and very pterodactyl-like, as some are describing it. Over the years, the memory would pop in my head about once every few years or so. But I've always pawned it off, that I was just a kid and that my vivid imagination was probably playing tricks on me. Being that I was under 10 at the time, and a kid's imagination is very strong. I've always been a skeptic of the paranormal, and always look for a rational explanation for things like this. However, when I first saw the article about the sightings on Facebook earlier this year, this childhood memory immediately came to mind, and I began to again question what I saw. Because as big of a skeptic as I am of things like this, and with the many things that I have found rational explanations for, there are still about 3 or 4 experiences I've had in my life that, try as I may, I still cannot find a rational explanation for. I could still maintain that my childhood imagination got away from me, but I honestly don't think that's the case after hearing about the 2 sightings earlier this year, which is now up to 55 sightings according to this news article on Vice. Link in the description. After seeing the first article on Facebook some months back, I began to think that maybe I really did see this thing. On the other hand, I thought that anybody could write a phony article and put it on social media. But if that is the case, then it would be an awfully big coincidence. A week or two after reading the Facebook article, I told a family member about the article because I once told them about this strange sighting I had as a child. Although the first time I told them of the sighting, I still chalked it up as it was a long time ago and my mind and memory could be deceiving me. When I told them of the article, they said they saw a recent report on the news that 2 people claimed to see the same thing, which to me brings a lot more validity to the article I read. From what I remember in my experience, I was riding in the back seat of my parents' convertible with the top down one summer night. I want to say it was in the late 80s or very early 90s. I was laying down in the back seat looking up at the night sky. I couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 at the time. We were on the way to the grocery store, as my dad worked mostly second and third shifts. So we would sometimes get groceries at night. As we drove down the road, I remember seeing this large dark creature swoop past overhead. From what I remember, it was flying perpendicular to the direction our car was traveling. I don't remember exactly how low it was flying, but it was low enough for me to discern that it was larger than a person, and it had an enormous wingspan. It was soaring open-winged like a hawk would fly. It blended with the night sky pretty well, and was directly above and perpendicular to the car, so I was the only one in the car who saw it. When I originally told my parents about it years later, they said they don't remember this happening, so I assumed they did not see it, as they were looking at the road and I was looking up in the sky. I don't remember being startled by it, and I know I did not make any noise or scream because my parents do not recall the experience at all. I remember being intrigued by it because I was into dinosaurs as a kid, and it very much reminded me of a pterodactyl. I was old enough to know it's not something you see every day, but still young enough to not question whether or not something like that should exist. I had no concept yet of what paranormal was, and therefore was not scared of it. Again, I am a very rational person, and always look for a logical explanation with things like this. I am not saying that it did happen for certain. There is still a chance that I could have just imagined the whole thing. Maybe my mind is just reconstructing an old memory of what I thought I saw as a wildly imaginative kid. However, since seeing that first article and hearing about other people's accounts of it, and reports of it on the evening news, I'm leaning more towards that my memory serves me correctly on this one. Ever since then, I've felt a compelling urge to reach out and tell someone that I think I saw the same thing too. This is my reason for contacting you. Because you are collecting accounts of this creature being sighted, and I wanted to see who else has seen this thing. And maybe we could all feel less crazy about what we saw.
I, along with 4 of my friends, saw a pterodactyl about 3 to 4 feet tall through the body around April of 1969. As memory serves, it might have been 1970. I do recall we were riding in my friend's 1969 Boss Mustang. We were on a gravel road south of Park Forest, Illinois, a small suburb on the south side of Chicago. At that time, there was nothing but country and farmland south of Park Forest. We were heading west on Stinkel Road going to Money, Illinois. We were in the valley a few houses west of where I used to live as a boy. I was like 17 or 18 years old. It was a foggy night, a really thick blanket of fog close to the ground. As we started up the hill, we emerged from the fog, and it was a crystal clear night with a full or almost full moon and lots of stars. We were driving along and my friend just slowed down and stopped the car. He leaned up over the steering wheel and stared at an angle out of the windshield. I asked him what he was doing and he didn't answer me. He just kept staring out the windshield. So I leaned forward and looked up and out of the windshield, and silhouetted against the full moon, sitting on the top of a telephone pole, was this pterodactyl. The body was covered with fur like a bat. It had its wings folded up tight against its sides, and you could see little claws at the top of each folded wing. It had a tail similar in length to that of a cat in comparison to the body size, but it was smooth like a rat's tail except for a single tuft of hair at the very end. As we sat there watching it, it was looking to the left and then to the right, and then it would look off across the golf course to the north. The whole time it was switching its tail around like a cat does when they are aggravated, very nervous movements. The neck and head were smooth leather-like, no hair at all. I don't know exactly how long we sat there watching it, probably only a few minutes, but it eventually looked down at us in the car and then threw its head back, opened its mouth, showing very impressive teeth, and let out a blood-curdling screech, and with 3 flaps of its wings did a half back-over twist and sailed silently out over the field, headed toward a large marsh south of our position, and disappeared into the fog. We were only 30 feet from the base of the phone pole, and the pole was probably only 20 to 25 feet tall, so we were very close and got a real good look at the thing. Over the years, I have only shared this information with a few close friends, and they treat me like I'm nuts. I am still friends with 2 of the guys I was with that night, but we have never talked about what we saw that night.
I was on a trip to Myrtle Beach. I am not a good passenger and tend to wig out on the interstate, so we were taking the back roads. It was pretty late at night. We had just gone through some little podunk town and we're in the woods now. Pine Tree Woods. He was driving and I looked over at him. Through the window on his side, it looked like someone's laundry had come off the line and was getting blown around. Like a big bed sheet getting hit by gusts of wind. Except we were in the woods and there were too many trees around for it to be laundry blowing around. So I'm looking dead at this big white thing and my brain couldn't wrap around what it was, but it was coming straight at the car. The closest thing I can think of would be a pterodactyl. I'm panicking and positive we are going to die. So I'm screaming go, go, go and my eyes are squeezed shut. And there is no way in hell I'm going to watch it kill us. Of course we get away. But when we looked at the car, there was a big snotty smear on the driver's side window. We weren't drunk or high or recently released from a psych facility. I've talked to other people about it and no one has had a similar experience. I can't find anything like it online. The closest thing I've found are thunderbirds, but this thing was not dark in color.
It was once named La Laguna de Diablo because early settlers thought a monster lurked inside its watery depths. But Los Angeles County's largest natural lake, Elizabeth Lake in the Antelope Valley, is now considered heaven by nature lovers, who are attracted by its inherent beauty and its scores of animal and bird species. The lake's modern history dates back to the early days of California's founding. In 1780, Father Junipero Serra named it La Laguna de Diablo because those who lived near the lake formed by the San Andreas Fault believed it contained the devil's pet. In the late 1800s, Tiburcio Vasquez and other banditos used the lake as a hideout for their stolen cattle and horses. It was later named Elizabeth Lake for a young girl who lived nearby and slipped into the water. She wasn't hurt, but friends dubbed it in her honor as a joke and the name stuck. And just in case the legend of the Elizabeth Lake monster might scare away any potential buyers, walkers said the last reports of the monster's appearance were in the late 1800s, when several men claimed they witnessed the ascension of a huge monster with bat-like wings from the lake.
I decided that I needed to go to the grocery store to pick up a few things. I was out in the country, driving slowly, all alone, going over a bridge at about 2 p.m. on a sunny springtime afternoon in April 2012 when all of a sudden I saw something coming up from underneath the bridge. From out of the passenger seat window and about 5 or 6 feet from me I can see something medium gray. As it came up a little bit more I could see part of a wing, part of a beak, part of a head crest, and a big gold eye like a cat's eye. It looked as if it was struggling to get up over that bridge and up over my truck because of its heavy weight. As I slowed down even more and looked at it closely, the first thought that entered my mind was prehistoric, and my second thought was it looks like something that shouldn't still be alive today. My third thought was prehistoric bird. I then watched out the windshield as it flew up over my truck, up into the sky, and off toward a wooded area, southward. It seemed as if everything was in slow motion as I watched it fly up above my truck and fly away. I watched its wings above me and how they looked and moved. They moved like a muscular wave from one end of the wing to the tip. The wings were thick like a steak, were shaped like an airplane's wings, and had 3 sections to them, with black creases or wrinkles running down them. And on the middle outside of the wings were what looked like fringes, which I found out later were claws or fingers. Next, I noticed the torso, how big it was and that it was shaped kind of like an egg, and then the head crest and how strange it looked up on top of the head, and how the head crest kind of bounced up and down as the creature flew. I also noticed the length of the neck. I noticed the legs and the tail, how the legs just floated in the air and kind of bounced on each side of the tail, and how the tail had a heart-looking shape at the end of it. I also noticed that it had no feathers and that it was probably as big as a small airplane, and bigger than my little Chevy S10 pickup. I was in some kind of shock the rest of the day, just walking around and trying to function in some kind of a daze, going through the motions, but only really halfway there. My mind was trying to come to terms with what I had seen. I contacted 2 of my friends who suggested that what I had really seen was a heron, albatross, pelican, or some local big bird, even though I told them that this creature was huge, not big, and had no feathers at all. Next, I contacted Cornell University Ornithology Lab and spoke to a lady named Laura. She said that there are no birds that match my description. Next, I did an internet search under prehistoric birds but kept coming up with posts about pterosaurs. I didn't really know what pterosaurs were, but I knew that they weren't birds and that they didn't exist any longer, or so I thought. So I became discouraged and gave up until early 2013. In early 2013, I decided to do another internet search under prehistoric birds, and up popped Jonathan David Whitcomb's name and the word pterosaur again. This time I decided to contact this man via email, and he responded to me and wanted to do an interview. During my interview with him, I discovered that what I had seen was probably a pterosaur. Now, all I had to do was come to terms with that.
We live in a very rural area about a mile or less from a large lake. My husband and I have seen something we cannot classify into any known bird. We have only seen them at night and only during the warmer season months. There is an interstate being built to run through here, and we saw the largest groups of them around the time most of the clear cutting was going on. They are scary big. It was large enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck and make me hesitant on letting our animals out after dark. It was definitely larger than any bird I had ever seen. They are very dark in color, possibly black. It's difficult for me to give a detailed description of it. But my husband, who got a better look at the bird, says it has a large beak, huge wingspan, and long tail. What sets it apart from anything I have ever seen was that it had a lightning bug-type glow to it. The lighting trait of it was an irregular pulsating lighting that ran the entire length of its body in no type of pattern. It seemed to just hover its wings unmoving, much like a kite does, but when it moved it was very fast. My first thought was that it had to be some type of military aircraft we have yet to learn about, but the more I have seen it, the more animal-like qualities I have noticed. Some reasons for that are the pattern of flight isn't repetitious, hovering without making a sound, and it seems to move as if it is on the currents of the wind. My husband has heard a bird-like squawking that drew his attention to them the first time he saw one, but I have not. I was very skeptical at first, and was sure he had lost his mind. Being a military brat, I was sure that it was just something new, like having the Harriers before we were ready to come out about them. It took me seeing whatever it is several times to believe what I saw wasn't something mechanical. I got on the internet and learned that similar descriptions, some spot on and some not even close, have been reported. I'm still not sure what it may be, and I'm shy to say anything about it to others. It sounds crazy to me. My husband and I are not the only ones to have seen it. A friend of ours, a disbeliever, came out to see for himself. And the father of a friend, when we mentioned we had seen something weird, said he never told anyone because he was afraid that he'd be considered crazy. He told us that he was out on the lake by our place, in his boat at night, and had seen what he thought we had described to him. I am interested in someone more educated in birds and animals to come out and see if they can cite this thing and find out if they could debunk or explain it. I don't know if it is a plane, maybe a glider of some sort, or an animal, but something is there. It may be able to be explained, maybe not.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.